Hey, welcome to the Comedy Mentor podcast. My name is Rebecca Kaplan, and in this show, I'm going to be interviewing pro comics about how they made it, what advice they have for people who are newer, and just some of their stuff. I'm solicited questions from social media on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit. So in this episode, Michael Harrison is going to be answering some of your questions about how road gigs work, traveling to do comedy, what his advice is, and stuff like that. And he also does a lot of sketch comedy and stuff. And Michael's got a very impressive history. He has done shows all over the world, like literally, and he's also performed at the Just for Laughs Festival in Canada and done a special for Canadian TV. He's got a Dry Bar special coming out later this year. And if you're in the New York City area, he's also going to be on a show that I'm producing later this month on June 30th called Love at First Skype at the Players Theater in Greenwich Village. So check that out if you're in New York. Get into the podcast. There was a technical issue, so I lost the first 10 minutes of it, unfortunately, but we'll start where we picked up. Thanks for listening. Do you remember the last thing you said before we got cut off, or should we just move on?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, let's just move on then.
Okay.
I hope it wasn't that important.
I just told you how to make it. That was it.
Yeah, the secret.
Yeah, exactly. How you get all the work. So just finished it up. Now that's done. All right, moving forward.
Okay, so this is a question from Aaron. He is busy with a job and like spending time with his family, and he's wondering if grinding at open mics is like the only way to get noticed. Do you have any advice for how you like what you would do with like limited free time?
Yeah, travel. Right? I would probably go try to hit other rooms in other places. You know, if like he's working, save up and try to make some calculated moves in other markets. It's so funny because like the market you usually start in is one of the last ones that'll respect you. It's hilarious. It's like the last one that'll headline you, you know? I'm from Saskatoon, where we had like next to no locals. And that was like the last club that headlined me in Canada I was working. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to sort of make moves and build some credits and build sort of your own little status. Obviously, the internet's another one. You know, I think Zoom is very impressive now that you can get on Zoom and meet people in other areas and connect to new friends that are also sharing the same passions you are. And finding out more information. But without a doubt, it would be exploring. You know, I think exploring is a great technique. Even here in New York City, I see some of the people in the open mic circuit head off to New Jersey. And I know it's not super far, but like, yeah, it's a totally different market, and they're getting much better spots. And I think they're improving their brand.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. This is a follow-up from the same person. Should he tell bookers that he's willing to work for free, or would that be screwing over other comedians?
I don't think you should do that. Yeah, I think not only do I think that it screws over other comics, but I don't even think bookers respect it, right? Like if someone comes up to you and says, I could work for free, first off, it's a lame club. It's got to be a lame club that takes advantage of such comics. But the prestigious ones, if they were to hear you say that, I think they immediately sort of frown upon you and your ability. Right? Because we like spending money on, I think a lot of bookers I know like spending money on good talent, making them happy. You know, it's part of feeling good. You know, I book a show in Altoona, Pennsylvania, and someone came to me with the same thing, and I told them never to ever ask me not to pay them again. Like, I think it's just stupid, right? Like, the money's there for a reason. The budget's there. I'm going to pocket it? No, it's for the comics. So, yeah. I highly disagree with that. Like on almost every fiber of my body, you know? I just think it's also a terrible thing when bookers undercut other people for gigs or comics try to undercut other people, because where that that sort of works is like when corporates come into play and then you cut other comics for those corporates, and all of a sudden they don't pay as much. Like I I had like one instance, and it was an open mic comic too. But I remember he got offered this one gig for like $1,200, and it was like, this was Canada, so it was like 2 provinces over. It was like I think a 28-hour drive to the gig he was telling me about, and they're gonna pay him $1,200 for one show. He's never headlined, right? And he took it on as a headliner. I've honestly never seen him do longer than a 7-minute set at that point. And he booked another opener who maybe I've never seen do longer than a 5-minute set at that point. And he's like, well, this is a good chance for me to learn. And I'm like, oh man, it's such a good chance to like book a really good headliner, take like 15%, throw yourself also some money for opening, and have a killer show so you could reserve that contact. But another thing that really upset me about it was they offered him a flight and he said no. They said, oh yeah, and we'll get you a flight from where you're from. And he's like, nah, don't worry about it. And I was like, why? You have to drive like 28 hours. He's like, oh, I'd feel bad. And I'm like, no, you just cost another comic who, if they ever go with comedy again after whatever performance you give, you just cost that comic the opportunity to get a free flight. Like you just set us lower. So absolutely, I'm not a fan of comics belittling the worth of what comedy is.
Yeah, that's a very reasonable. And I guess if you if it's something that you do for your own living, it's not good for people to undercut you.
Well, it's not even that. And no offense to this Aaron guy, I always try to keep in mind that there's a guy who actually asked this. So I don't want to come off like like such a jerk. But like to a degree, you got to remember these people make money. They know money. They're business people. They understand. So when you come up and say, I want to give you something free, you immediately could turn on a predatory thing for them to be like, yeah, sure. You do all the work and bring me all the money, and I won't even do anything because you should be thankful to work for me. And really, it's just a bar. Like whenever I ran a bar show when I was coming up, I always charged, and they always said yes and paid me because you can do that. The people know business. They will try to screw you. Don't get me wrong. Business people love trying to negotiate you down, do it. But remember in the back of your head, they know business. That's why they have an establishment. They know it costs something for a successful night. And their night, means something to him. Like he needs patrons in there. If you say, hey, I'm going to try to bring patrons with a positive experience into your establishment, and this has a value, he understands it when you talk to him in a business sense. But if you make it seem like it's a favor to you to just let me perform for free while you make the money, it's like, why would you do that? Try to get some respect from them so they could also help you out with what is it? My favorite establishments I ever worked for helped me with marketing, marketed also to their own clients and stuff, and helped me make it successful as a whole, and gave me drink specials to promote further to other alcoholics I knew. So, when it comes to that stuff, I'm absolutely against offering those services for free. It's just so much time, so much effort, and I don't think it looks good on you.
Yeah, I think you're one of the best negotiators that I know.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, whatever. You told me not to do that. An app came to me asking to pay me for content, but first they wanted me to put something directly on their app.
Yeah.
And you told me to ask them for, something different. So and they never got back to me after that, but they probably would have also maybe not paid me had I downloaded their app.
But also, what's the end result with anything? You're basically saying your worth is what it was, and it was a low worth is what they asked from you. So yeah, in the end of the day, you have to think to yourself, what am I doing now? Where is my worth, and where am I going? Some comics want to offer things. One thing that does work for this Aaron guy, honestly, having a car. That works. I don't care what anyone says. And headliners do not have cars anymore. It's like they can't afford cars. So openers with cars that drive headliners places, they're in demand. Like I've noticed a lot of comics across the States who are cutting their teeth really well in really good rooms just because openers didn't have cars. I've even got to that point where I was in North Dakota recently, and to rent a car turned out to be way pricier than I thought. So I said I wanted to book the opener, and I used recommendations from other comics in the scene, along with the one, note that I need them to have a car. Like I'll take care of gas and everything, but whatever it is, it's gonna save me on that, right? So then I pay them; they can do the time, and even if they can't finish the time, I'll do the rest of whatever their time is plus my time. But like it became important that you find an opener with a car sometimes, right? In certain areas because you're flying in and out, and it just makes way more sense to have that. So I've noticed a lot of openers get work by just throwing out there to headliners that they're like, oh yeah, I have a vehicle. And they're like, hey, does your car have a headshot? I don't know. Yeah, I'll book your car. You could come.
For anyone listening to this, I have a car, so but also, Michael, you're probably going to get inundated with requests to get booked on your Altoona show. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's once a month. I'll take requests. I don't care.
Okay. Can I do your Altoona show?
Yeah, probably.
Yay.
Definitely. We're getting somewhere.
Okay. Perfect.
Look at this.
The next question is from Anne, who asked, she basically asked, like, how does the business of road gigs work? Like, does the club pay for your hotel, for your travel?
Yep. Not travel. Some of them do travel. Some of them do like extra money. Blah. Hotel is always a guarantee. There's been a few clubs in the pandemic that made requests of like, by the way, could you save us on a hotel or whatnot? Yeah, but that was the only time where I think that's come up. Normally hotels covered. Airfare for a lot of places is either sort of put in the price. Yeah, pretty much put in the price, right? Even when I headlined Australia, they sort of just like threw in an air travel per diem. And then like, yeah, I hope you get to Australia and back with this amount, but I did. So for the most part, yeah. And then like you have your BCD clubs, which I mean, I'm absolutely positive they don't do airfare. My corporates usually do airfare. Some don't, so that's why you put it just in the price. So that usually comes down to negotiations.
That must be really expensive to like include air travel to Australia.
Oh, Australia is actually cheap out of New York. It's surprising, right?
Really?
Even when I headlined in Indonesia, that was $700 round trip, right? So I was just like, this is balling. I think I made like $300 off the per diem they gave me. So that was great.
So you've like kind of done stand-up like all over the world and all over the country and all over Canada, right? So the next question comes from Ariel. She asked, how do you tailor your set to like different audiences? Do you think about that? And what do you do if like what you thought would do well isn't doing well? Like how do you save yourself?
Oh, buddy. Crowd work always works. That's like the tool every comic goes to. Whenever I see a comic struggle, they'll go into crowd work. And I'm like, that's why they do it. Overall, no, I usually try not to tailor too much. Like you get an idea of sort of what doesn't work. What sucks about those other countries is like sometimes you start questioning the specifics. Specifics, which is what makes all comedy jokes tend to be much funnier when you're specific. Like it's just a comedy note, mentioning a name brand in a joke. To get your point across. But when you live in a country that maybe the only North American thing they know is like Starbucks and Coke, you're sort of limited and you start going back like, oh, I guess I can't make even like a Tiger Woods reference, So yeah, it's funny how you sort of like when I do those gigs, I'll play it slightly safer and I'll stick to usually my family material, relationship material, all the experiences that we normally have. As well as like I usually pepper it with observations about the area. And then once in a while I do touch on something specific just to see where the audience is at. But funny enough, normally whenever you get booked in those countries, you're actually performing for expats. So I felt the same way. And I'm speaking more, I guess, from cruise ships. So when I did cruise ships, I tended to have to play safer that way. But whenever I've been to like Indonesia, when I did Singapore, I was performing for tons of expats who knew all the references. So yeah, I mean, it depends your audience. But if you do have one that isn't very familiar with stuff, yeah, you tend to sort of stick to observations about what they're going through, your surroundings, and then going into usually like, I guess, more human experiences. I mean, the funny thing is about comedy, honestly, here's the thing, at least in my opinion, right? I always want to say in my opinion because everyone's different. But when comics try to think too much about being relatable to everyone, what's the most relatable thing is emotion. So it's not necessarily what you're saying, because you can always describe what you're saying. It's the fact that you care or that it has an emotion behind it, because then you can tend to follow that. You tend to get addicted to that. Like my favorite word in anyone's stand-up bit is always I, because I want to hear sort of their version of whatever they're talking about. I want them involved in what they're talking about. So it's like, I know this is, a pretty big experience, but I remember when I used to have a bit on wisdom teeth, I would do colleges, and there's tons of kids who didn't have their wisdom teeth removed. But they related to the bit because I talked about the frustration of the surgery, how nervous I was, and I use that all for comic fodder. But they themselves have been in a scenario where they've been seen by a doctor, or they're worried about their life or worried about something, and they themselves don't need to know much about having wisdom teeth removed in order to get the sense and to get the bit. So it's stuff like that too. It's like you sort of have to remember not to worry too much about how to relate to your crowd, but the fact that you're using emotion to relate to them. You're picking like this bit, I'm going to talk about something I'm happy about, or here's something I'm frustrated about, here's something I'm angry about. Like Lewis Black, I see him talk about certain things. Every country is always angry. I think people are just really into, I don't care what this guy's talking about. I want to feel like I know this feeling of being frustrated and upset with feeling like the world's controlling you. So yeah, it tends to be, that's always relatable. So yeah, maybe in that sense, like keep in mind to consider, I mean, yeah, I don't know her, so I haven't seen her act or anything. But what is it like if she uses it or not? Yeah, try throwing emotion in. Usually that stuff, I think audience always picks up those nuances, and that's sort of what relates to a lot of things. Like I've never been pregnant, but if a woman talks about the pain of pregnancy and whatnot, I get it right away. And it's not necessarily on the degree she would get it, but I know my own pain, other pain I've went through, and I could relate on that level.
Do you think about that in terms of like your sketches as well, like kind of making them universal, or do you want to talk a bit about your like writing process?
I don't think about anything universal. I sort of think about what I think's funny and what I feel like. It sort of has to come down to, like I say, what I care about, because ultimately, like one of my least favorite things usually is when a comic's like being a little too generic. It's not that I'm anti that, but like, when a comic's too generic, I notice that I just sort of phase out and I forget and I don't pay attention to their bits. But when they say they're a part of it, it matters more. It matters to me more. How about this? Like, I'll put it this way. If someone's like, making fun of like Britney Spears or whatever, it's like, hack, I don't care. Like, it just goes through me. I don't, whatever. But like, if some girl's like, my boyfriend got super into Britney Spears, and now he like super addicted, is always looking it up, and I feel jealous. And all of a sudden, I'm like, where's this bit going? Like, I want to know how this ends. I'll start laughing. I become a part of it. Like, it's sort of ingrained. You get me a little bit more invested that way. So yeah, like material-wise, that's what I've always appreciated.
Cool. What are you laughing at?
Oh, I just like how I go so into it, and you're like, cool. All right, next. Right? And I was like...
I was going to ask you... I was going to ask you a follow-up question.
Please do.
Okay. Someone named Ill Affection on Twitter asked, in terms of your writing process, do you have any advice on how do you normally work in terms of like how often do you edit stuff and like revise it? When do you like let things go?
Oh man, it's so funny, man. Like sometimes I've written things that I wasn't good enough to make funny. There was like one joke that literally had to have come back in my act 4 or 5 times over like the 12 years I've been doing it, 12, 13 years I've been doing it, where I finally got it right on like the 7th year, 8th year I brought it back. It was like I was just a better writer at the time. And I was like, oh, do this, whatnot. My advice, like I say, I always hate saying anything indefinites because every comic has a different path, and I refuse to try to ingrain myself that way or influence that way. But I've always believed that art's the best when it's simple. So the Beatles was like 3 chords, and they were the biggest rock band of all time. They really didn't try to expound too much. A lot of movies were just about one thing drawn out. Like Gravity was one situation in space, just really drawn out. It was simple. A lot of comics, like even Jim Gaffigan, how he just like will break down a joke and just focus on this one minutia thing, get the most laughs out of it, move to the next one, get the most laughs out of it. He just focuses on the simplicity of the thing. And Brian Regan also is very, very much about the simplicity of the topic, so he really focuses on what he wants to get or make fun of or acknowledge. And then he writes this amazing joke about it. And sometimes goes over it, and adds flavors to it, sometimes characters. I love that stuff. But behind all of it, it's always usually simplicity that I feel like is what gets everything, what makes it. How you stretch it out or how you flavor it may look complex, but behind everything, it's just a simple idea is usually what people are going for. So in terms of you even bringing up my sketches earlier, I mean, all my sketches I did was just usually one simple thought, and then how do I turn this thought into 4 to 5 minutes of a thing? Delusional Man is just like a guy who thinks everyone's trying to have sex with him. Like, that's it. Just show a bunch of scenarios and get weirder each time. And what would be great to me is if this character always won, and that's sort of how I came up with that. It was just easy. Mean Jenga was just me looking at the game Jenga and like, oh, this is the only board game I know where there's no winners and only one loser, right? Like, why don't they advertise that that's what this is? You're just a game hoping you're not the loser of your friends, because then you have to sit out while they all have fun and play for however many rounds. But really, it's just finding out who the worst of the group is. So yeah, it's just one idea, but then I turn those into like 3-4 minutes of lines, jokes, add-ons, blah. But that simplicity is just it. It's just that one thing is all that matters to me. It's got to be congruent through the whole thing. So yeah, same with like jokes. It's usually just I try to stick to what's simple. Once you try to put 3 or 4 observations into one joke at the same time, I really feel like you start convoluting a little bit and you start losing some of the impact that those other pieces have. Whereas I feel like you could break them down and sort of mesh them better and easier. Like even storytellers, I feel like they really take a minute, even though it's all woven into the same story, they take a minute per premise that they want the laughs, and they really wring it out before bringing it into the next part of the story, where they use another thing and they like wring it out for laughs. Like they keep focus and keep making where the funny is very simple.
And I think just to like bridge into the next thing that I was going to like, I think you were saying earlier this week that like it's not necessarily like just a pure meritocracy where like the best writers always rise to the top. Like there are a lot of other things that like, right. Do you want to, not that you're not a very good writer. That's not how I meant to make that. I just realized that my coming
is turning into a roast. I love it.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, just in terms of like, I guess like the networking or like business side of stuff, someone named Jennifer asked, what is there a point that you see as like the biggest turning point like in your career, or maybe like a smaller series of turning points?
Yeah, like there's like a bunch of things that happen in my life. Like, I mean, certain life lessons too. This might have nothing to do with comedy, but it really shaped how I approach things. But I once went to a karaoke bar with a buddy of mine, and we showed up. We showed up like pretty much near the end of the night. It was like 1:50, and we were so jacked to do karaoke. And we sat at we sat at the bar. The server came over. What'd you want? And I was like, well, what I want is to do some karaoke. And she's like, sorry, it's we're doing last call right now, and no one else can get up. But it's last call. Did you want a drink? And I was like, okay. So like, I ordered a beer with my buddy, and then she walks. I'm a little deflated, and he turned around and he's like, "Are you actually going to listen to her?" And I was like, well, yeah, I don't know. She works at the bar. And he's like, well, you see that guy over there behind the DJ? Or I'm sorry, behind the record, the DJ? He's like, looks like he's running the music thing. Why don't I go talk to him and find out if we are? And then he walked over there. I saw him mouthing in his ear. I saw the DJ all of a sudden laugh really loud. They did a head nod. He walked by. He said, I just found out that we're the last ones of the night. I was like, that's insane. And he's like, Mike, for the rest of your life, never ever listen to what someone else tells you you can do. Just go find out yourself. And that was like the thing I always like that was like a moment where then we destroyed a karaoke, and it could have been more magical of like a night. But that lesson was like one of the best lessons I've ever learned. Like the amount of rejection I've gotten in this career and the amount of other opinions that I have to bump into, they have to tell me that's not going to work. This isn't a thing. What are you doing? That's stupid. That I come into with any of my ideas, I'm always served best to ignore and just do it anyways if I believe in it, you know? And yeah, I feel like that's sort of is the turning point of like how I started making Further Everything, because mostly everyone in comedy, you know, tells you the scariest things. Even becoming an American, it's hilarious, you know, like how Canada's like, it's so tough, you'll never make it, it's really hard. And after doing it, I was like, no, it's just a lot of work, you know. I got through, like, so yeah, I've always taken it like I always look at that moment as a pinnacle, at least in my human development, that I was just like, yeah, everything I do now, I'm just gonna do, you know, I'm just gonna do for myself, and if I believe in it, no other opinion should stop me, you know? So I do it.
This is a question from Reddit. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh man, for my younger self, damn, there's so many jokes I would love to tell myself never to do. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing. Don't say that joke. You're an idiot. Like the third set I ever did, oh man. I did a comedy competition. I lifted my shirt and I brushed my nipples with toothpaste while telling my jokes and not acknowledging that I was brushing my nipples. And I bombed, as I should. And I even sat next to my friends who saw me for the first time, and I think they moved away from me. It was just like, yeah, I tell myself, don't do this stuff. What's wrong with you? Also, like in a networking thing, I really wish I could tone myself down. I could have looked back and toned myself down a bit on a lot of that as well, because I was very aggressive. I was very determined, and I was very headstrong. And some of that was sort of needless, you know? I can't say I was the worst at it, but I remember in particular when I was an amateur, with all the amateurs in Toronto at the time, is so mean to each other, so competitive and cliquey and blah. And then it's funny is like all of us got passed into clubs or at Yuck Yucks. It's like the veil gets pulled and we're like, we treat each other like crap for this, right? Like, what's wrong with us? You know? And then you sort of settle and you just do comedy. You just remember like you're in it for the art and for the love and not to be bothered by other people. Just do your thing, you know? So particularly, I'm very embarrassed by some of that. And I wish I could go back and tell myself, like, in terms of like when I was an amateur, like, Be chill, be supportive of everyone. You don't know where anyone's going. This is honestly, anyone who does this starts off doing it for free. You got to respect that. Like I say, it all comes down to investment. They're doing something for free and going out. That means they appreciate what this is and they love it. So you need to give everyone, at least first off, that respect. And also, like, it's like any painting, right? Like whenever you see somebody starting a painting, you don't know what they're making. You know, it could look ugly. It doesn't make sense to you, you know. So, but then when it's done, it looks gorgeous, and you're like, oh, that's what you were doing the whole time. You were trying to create this. That insane. So it's like everyone's road is different. Don't judge anyone. Just do your thing. Everyone's trying to create art, and they're working on their canvas, you know. So, yeah, to that degree. I mean, I wish I could have toned down my competitiveness. I think in my amateur years, I really wish I did.
But I guess like I do want to. I'll just say. I mean, this. I guess this is like fairly obvious, but like I guess like that advice is probably like not one size fits all. Like if I had to like go back to myself, I'd be like be way more aggressive than you're being.
Yeah, I thought it was about me. But like for you, yeah, you can be more aggressive for sure, right? Like, I mean, within respect to your other comedians, like, of course, sometimes like I watch you, Rebecca. I think you're very, very funny and great. I'm like, why don't you just tell people that? Why don't you just like apply yourself? Sometimes you get nervous, but yeah, it's like apply yourself a little. I mean, I think this scene really respects you, and I think you're putting out very quality work. So it's yeah, you can flaunt it, you can show it, right? You can ask for gigs.
Thank you. Wait, are you? I meant like 5 years ago. I could have. Are you saying I should be more aggressive like right now?
Why not? Right, like to a degree, yeah. Because even you were telling me how you were nervous, and you told me this before, just like how nervous you were about like investing. And like losing money and blah, you know, it's like that type of thing where you're like, no, I think you would make contacts. I think you would stand out. I think like even in particular now, yeah, I find you a lot more different. Like obviously original voices always stand out. Like that's another like sort of funny thing about like even me coming up is like competitions were a nightmare for me because you always had like a young white guy who looked like me, like three of us. And you put us all next to each other, like we're just gonna all cancel each other out and lose each other, right? So competitions is such a nightmare for me. But like you, for instance, like would stand out, right? Like I think you have a very original voice, and you're very unique.
Thanks. That's interesting because I've kind of decided to never do competitions again because I feel like I always fit. Like I feel like I'm so weird. It's like I can never win a competition.
Yeah, but it's not even about winning. Like you have to get that out of your head. I remember, yeah, I told you this before. When I did Vegas, I think I was put in like this wild card round where like we're all guaranteed to lose, and I think there was only 9 audience members. And that means nothing. I didn't think it was a particularly good performance. Like I didn't think I killed or anything. But like the first week's winner that year got like, I think it was like 51 weeks of work. We're supposed to. Second place gets like 9 weeks, and third gets like 4 weeks. And I just hung around Vegas and did other shows, and bookers happened to see me at them. I ended up getting 11 weeks of work off of that fest. That one time, I beat up the guy who came in second, and I was like, I had lost that competition. So, I mean, yeah, when it comes down to like the stuff, it's like just being in the room with the people, just being yourself, just making connections, right? Never ever take that stuff to heart. Competitions are lame. If I could think about the amount of comics who beat me in a competition that have also opened for me, you know, and that's not a status thing. They're all great, but like, yeah, we sort of go to see that it doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters, you know. Who even cares anymore? Right? It's like when comics complain about how they have to open for a YouTube star. Like, yeah, but they filled the audience. Who even cares at this point? Like, drop your status. Like, let's just do the gig and kill it and start building so you never have to go through that again if you don't want to. But, yeah, don't pay attention. People actually just really respect, like, people who try, people who work, people who are there, people that they connect to, you know?
Can I ask a follow-up question? And this is definitely self-serving, but I think you're very like naturally charming and gregarious and handsome. What about do you have any advice for people that are like awkward and weird and not like super handsome?
Yeah, you're gonna do way better than me. I don't think those things necessarily fit for comedy, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe there was a time for it, right? That Dane Cook time, but overall, I don't. I think flaws. Comedy's all about flaws. I think weirdness. Like, how about this? I think Jim Carrey is an attractive guy. Like when you looked at him when he was younger, he was an attractive guy, and he would screw up his whole face to make him very unattractive, or to make him look flawed or different. And that's sort of how he bypassed his looks, I felt like. And a lot of female comedians, they constantly tell me that they dress down before they go on stage because audiences like them more. Like ultimately, sort of what we're doing on stage is we're just creating a relationship with the audience. Like the audience is a unified voice. We're trying to create them as one person, and we're having a one-sided conversation where we talk, they all laugh together. So we're trying to unify them all as one and be that voice. And sometimes, like, the best way to do it is sort of just to identify the characters, identify your personality or what you are to them. Like, there was this brilliant comedian she lives in England now. But I remember when I was young, I opened for her, and she was, I'm not lying, I was like in a restroom, and there were two guys talking about how women weren't funny, right? And I was like, oh no, this is like a rough place, right? So it's like, oh no, this is whatever. So I went up, and I had a good set, and she went up and smashed it, like blew it down, right? And I remember at the end of the show, she came to me and was like, oh, I want to go smoke weed. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we went to the parking lot and started smoking weed. And I told her, I was like, man, you are so great. And not only that, but it like blew my mind. Like I was in the restroom, these two guys, like this is what they said. They said, women aren't funny. And I was like, what do you do? How do you get through that? And she's like, oh, it's easy, Mike. Like me, I put on my glasses and I do my act, and everyone always looks at me like their little sister, and no one lets their little sister bomb. Like she's just that likable. She was that fun. She's playful. Like she almost knew what her character was to that audience. Like she made them love them because she put that there, and other comics, have other different tactics. There's like, I remember I worked with a very dark comic who dressed up, tie, outfit. And he's like, I want to look classy so that my dark stuff gets through to them. Apparently the dress is how that opened it up for them. So yeah, I've noticed comics have sort of psychological things to get their material across easier. And I find that very, very fascinating. And a lot of people do similar stuff to that. But yeah, I don't necessarily think being charming or good looking is actually viewed as the gateway to humor. I think it's I think it's usually eccentrics or people with isolated backgrounds,
Sure. I didn't mean like for performing. Like, I think I'm very funny, not to like,
of course.
Whatever.
Yeah.
What?
You should, it's your material. You should think you're funny.
Sure. But I meant in terms of like the networking, like the in-person networking that you were talking about.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. To a degree, like, I still don't think all that stuff really, it shouldn't matter. I mean, just in case, I don't know. Maybe there's creepy bookers. I hope there isn't. But I hope that stuff doesn't matter, But I think like someone like you who could have a good tape or have good sets, like it's just sort of easy to identify what it is. Like once you know comedy well enough, like I've done a ton of Just for Laughs auditions. And I've done that old dumb comic thing in my head where I'm like, I did better than him. How did he get it? And it's funny because now I'm at a stage, and now that I've judged comedy and I've seen so much of it, I don't listen to the audience. When I watch comedy, I'm like, who's doing something different? Who's being themselves? Who's standing out? You know, I remember watching a competition where this guy, I mean, he's a new guy, so I don't want to make it sound awful or whatnot, but he was pretty awful. Like, he killed. He went on stage, confident, owned it, act outs for everything. Like, women are this, and he's just the man, and that whole gag. Uh, and he crushed. And then there was like this sort of eccentric guy who liked scarves. He had a scarf on. Kept talking. I loved his scarf. He played with his scarf, uh, and I was just like blown away. And he did okay. He did okay, but he won. He's the one I voted for. He was the one that two of the three judges voted for. And yeah, the guy who got all the audience who loved him lost, and people booed the result. What do I care? You're wrong. You know, you're wrong. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, to a degree, competitions, you sort of have to encourage good comedy. It's not about like, oh, audiences laughing because like audiences, they're just going to follow easy trends or easy tropes, but you don't want comedy to go with it like that in the future. So you want originality to always win. Like, as a judge, as any person, like if you're in a competition with people who actually care about this art form, they have to think that way. And usually they do. Just for Laughs does. Like, I now look back at some of their choices when I thought I should have made it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was right. I was like too green. I was doing easy stuff. I was like catering to I don't know, like sort of my strengths without being maybe more vulnerable, or digging deeper within a topic. You know, like I wasn't there, and I really respect looking back on that now. And thankfully, I never said something out loud. But yeah, like when I hear comics go over that, I mean I never judge them for it because I'm like, yeah, I've known those thoughts and I was there at one point too. Because it doesn't make sense, but like after a while I started seeing it and it makes more sense. Like, there's certain comics that just interest me, and even if they're not killing, I'm like, I so want to keep watching this person, or I want to go up and encourage them, because it's like it doesn't matter this result. Like, it's like I'm starting to see where your canvas is going, and it's exciting to me. I wanna encourage that. Like there's certain, gosh, like if we were to even use celebrity examples, sometimes I like look at Anthony Jeselnik and I'm like, how did that guy get created? That is a very, I think what he does is, because shock comedy to me is like, it's good. I've seen plenty of it, but like the way he does it is very impressive to me because he's a really handsome guy. So naturally you shouldn't like him. And he doesn't care, and he's more flippant about being that aggressive and mean. And the jokes are well crafted. I'm like, this only works if the jokes are that good, and they are that good. I think he writes really well, and that's why it all works. But I think what he pulled off was a very difficult character, where I'm like, I'm watching him and I'm like, man, I could already think of the venues that guy bombed in to get as good as he got. Like I could already look at the people who wouldn't have even given him a chance because he didn't have a name, coming up with that style and bombing, So yeah, like there's certain comics I'm very impressed that they took a much harder route. And yeah, like I bet you any money there were people who saw what he was trying to do early and had to go encourage him and be like, yeah, keep it up. Like, doing something different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess that is like a fair point, but as somebody who like had people, I mean, like I've definitely done sets like before, like maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, where like people, I like didn't do that well, like in terms of like laughter, but then people like came up to me and they were like, comics came up to me and they were like, oh, that was like a really good set. And it's like kind of dispiriting to be like, yeah, but I didn't make anybody laugh.
Yeah, I mean, but that's sort of it. Like, I mean, it depends which comics. Some comics are liars and just say stuff to be friends. But I mean, if they're good comics and they have no reason to, I think you should sort of take heed of that. Because, yeah, usually they are coming out of their way to be like, oh, it's really good. I want to encourage you because I feel like you might not have felt encouragement from that. But like you've got something. Like, I don't have to hear laughs to get now where, like, what your vibe is and where you're going and how good you are, because ultimately, like, originality and risk taking is sort of like I don't know. It's what I think excites most comics. You know,
Hmm.
right? Like if we can predict everything, or we feel that it's very tropey, very manufactured, very structured, right? I remember a comic telling me he saw a comic do like what is it, bait and switch, and he was mocking it. He's like, "Oh, look at it! Oh, I'm going over here! I'm going over here! Oh, but I went over there! Audience will laugh at me! Laugh! Ah!" You know, I'm the same. I watch a bait and switch joke, and I'm like, "Oh, a trick! Good for you!" You know, or like, yeah, obviously. I mean, sometimes the trick of threes works, but yeah, when it's very formalic and obvious that where your third's going, like the change up, you're like, okay, I got it, you know. Um, yeah, there's a lot of things. I shouldn't call it out too much. I might offend someone who's watching this. But yeah, like there is ideas where you're like, oh, you could take a bigger risk there, or you could pick a more original example if you wanted, you know. Keep in mind, can I just throw in like I've made these mistakes and I've done this. Like this is me making fun of myself now. Like like I had to hear a pro who's like was one of the biggest comics in Britain joke about that, and the whole time I'm like, I used to do that. You know,
Yeah.
it was a
I,
fun realization. So I don't want anyone listening to this to feel like I'm talking about them or nothing. This is all about me. Like I'm referencing, I think, younger Mike when I'm making fun of him.
yeah. I can't wait to see your hour-long special where you just rub toothpaste all over your naked body.
It'll be something to market at least. People will be interested for at least 5 minutes, right? Like,
Oh, I think it's starting to make
counterclockwise. Ooh, I can't wait to see.
Yeah, I don't know. That like one of somebody like I eat used like in high school I ate burritos like incredibly messily.
Nice. That's funny.
Like I basically just like shoved it all into my face with my hands and whatever. And like
That means
one of my
honestly
friends
a funny thing to just put online. Just because you're such a thin, small Jewish girl, to put in like okay, actually that looks phallic. Not like that though, but like just eating like a big plate of something would be funny.
Yeah, I did film it. One of my friends told me to like just do it on stage, like to just get up on stage and like just do it without saying anything. And I never tried it just because I don't know. I thought I might get food everywhere, and also like it seemed like a stupid thing to waste like an open mic on. But
So dumb. Yeah, I wouldn't do it. I mean, you do it if you want, but like, yeah. If I could tell you anything about my nipple brushing experience, it was the first thing that came to my head of things I want to go back and change when you brought that up. Like, for how long I've been doing comedy, and I'm like, oh, I really wish I didn't do it that one night. That one night was awful for me.
yeah. I actually did film myself also eating a burrito really messily, like back in like March 2020, and I was like, "This is awful. I can't put this online."
Oh, funny. Okay.
If anybody wants to see that video footage, you can Venmo me.
Okay, like listen, I'm not even lying to you. There's like a category on YouTube where people just eat. Like just eat. They don't talk nothing. Like they eat a whole meal for like 18 minutes and over millions of views. Like they're killing it. I think like they in the editing they enhance some of the sound effects to make you feel like you're hearing them eat. But yeah, the crunch is everything. I'm like, this is it? They're just gonna eat? I watched all of one. It was really sad. I was like, they did. They just ate.
I think it's a fetish thing for some people, but I mean, I had like a dominatrix character, and like it got like a ton of views on YouTube, like by my standards, and I was looking at the analytic. I was like, oh, I did such a good job. But like then like looking at the analytics, it was like, oh, 70% of this traffic came from porn search terms.
Hilarious.
And it's like, should I lean into that?
Yeah, no kidding. It's funny when people lean into what they what they love. It's like, yeah, well, I'll just sell out. Forget it. Right?
Yeah.
This is what they want. This is what my character will be from now on. I will be the vegan dominatrix.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I've or we've been talking for a good long time. I'll have one last question for you. Is there anything else you want to add before I move on to?
No, go for it. Whatever.
Okay. Are there so let's see. So Jennifer. Oh wait. No, sorry, somebody. I lost. I'm so sorry. Someone named Belinda asked, "What 3 habits do you have that contribute to your success?"
Oh man, I mean, to each that's personal. To me, it'd probably be like I knew I respond to structure sometimes, so I started thinking of like, well, what if this was actually a day job? How would I divide my schedule? Right, like what would comedy be like? So yeah, I was like, oh, like an hour would be messaging people, then an hour would be the gym because I feel like working out helps the brain think, and an hour for writing, and then like another hour for I think like usually just doing research or like meandering with thoughts sometimes like in front of a computer, possibly writing a sketch, looking at stuff like that, and then yeah, maybe another like hour or two just going off to comedy clubs, you know. So like I tried to think in my day, how many hours would I put towards this, and I structure it that way. I feel like that was one thing that was great for me, like in terms of like output and encouraging stuff, because I sort of stopped putting myself in deadlines with like, oh, you got to make this, you got to do this, you have to have this much, because I wasn't sure if that was working. I felt a little blind by that. But when I put it in the idea of a work schedule, it found it much easier for me. Where I was like, oh, here's like, I just do an hour of this, just send a few messages to either shows you want to be on, whatever. I had a limit of 5 a day, only weekdays. You know, I put weird rules. But I did that. And yeah, I'd constantly get gigs. I constantly get, things coming in. Stuff like that. It was so funny. I think I landed like 3 weekends today, and I haven't gotten a weekend in like a week and a half on the road. And then I had like 3 offers today, and a lot of them were from stuff I sent out last week. So yeah, it's just that was one thing that I think really helped me. And another 2. What was the exact question again? By the way, 2 things that help, or 3 things that help me.
The question was, what are 3 habits?
Oh, habits. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, and then 2 other habits. Honestly, it probably, and this is just like, yeah, this is just now, but like focusing on obviously like putting out. Yeah, I'm sorry. Internet's another one thing during the day that I did, where I was like, oh yeah, tweet, Instagram, focus on like connecting with fans and whatnot. So yeah, that was another thing. Was starting to another habit I started growing into was like diversifying my comedy also a little bit more by going, oh, let's do sketch, let's do things where we learn, because everything's more exciting to you too when you're learning. You don't want to ever get sort of weak. And the third thing is usually when I'm at comedy clubs, like one habit is when you do a set, you thank the booker, like in an email, personal message. I really do tend to like to thank them. Be like, oh, having me, absolute pleasure. Look forward to seeing you again. Just because, like, yeah, I do appreciate it. I don't know. That was a thing I got when I was much younger, though. But I still do it. I think it's like just a casual thing,
Cool. Yeah, those are all good things, and definitely good advice. Thank you so much for doing this. Where can people find you, cool. And do you have any upcoming? What?
It was cool.
Yay.
Sorry.
Oh, where can people find you, and do you have any upcoming things that you want to plug?
My Dry Bar special comes out in like 5 months, so catch that. I'm shooting a TV show that comes out next year. A small part. And then, I made a short called Where's My White Privilege? So that's going through the film festival route. I'll be releasing a trailer sometime this week. And then as for another thing, I'm going to be starting a new podcast to compete with your podcast. So, Podcast Enemies. But you still have to do my podcast. So there you go.
Okay, yeah, I would love to do your podcast.
Nice. Other than that, in August, I think I'm headlining through Kansas and there are a few theaters. And then I got a bunch booked in Florida. And then I've got Oregon in September. And then I think I'm going up to BC and I'll be doing PA in October. So just a smorgasbord of dates. Look it up though. Michael, I'm on Instagram at Michael Harrison Comedian. And yeah, I'm all over.
Sweet. Thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, follow Michael on Instagram and Twitter.
Thank you.